Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy
the interview.
Today we are joined by the member for Sandringham and the Shadow Treasurer, Brad Rowswell. Brad, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, great to be with you, Francis, and thanks for the opportunity, mate.
No problem at all. Just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about you, could you give us a little brief description of yourself just before we get into the question?
Yeah, easy, mate, no worries. So I was born here in the Sandringham Electorate at the Sandringham Hospital in 1985, which, if you're doing the maths, that means I'm 38. I'll be 39 this year and 40 next year. Sort of looking forward to that. I've got a twin brother. My mum and dad were both born overseas. So mum was born in India, dad was born in the UK. They both came here as migrants. Dad served our country in World War II. So I grew up in the area. I went to schools locally, St Bede's College, Mentone, and I'm now married to Kate. We have two beautiful children, a 4-year-old boy, Charlie, and a 6-year-old girl named Abigail, and they keep us busy. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's quite interesting that you grew up in the area and you ended up becoming the local MP.
Mate, it's a great privilege. It really is. Like you would never, I would never have thought growing up that I'd have the opportunity that I do now to do what I do and to serve this community in the way that I have the opportunity to. And I don't take that for granted at all. I caught up with a group of St Bede's students, Year 11 politics students, just in Parliament recently actually, and it's pretty cool, right? So I went to St Bede's and great school, highly recommend it. And how many times can you say, I now represent a community where I was born in, where I grew up in, where I've lived practically all my life. So I guess that helps because you don't just know the area, but you know the people in the area, you know the community. Yeah. And politics for me, it's all about local stuff, right? It's got to be like local stuff first. So yes, I'm now the state shadow treasurer, which means I've got a statewide responsibility. But principally, if you your first responsibility is to look after your locals, right? And that's what I try to do.
And you must be a really local representative since you've been elected twice in a row now from 2018. I know there was a bit of a scare back in 2018. When
You've done your research, Francis.
Yeah.
Indeed. So 2018, I was elected with the slimmest of margins, about a 0.1% margin. I was re-elected in 2022 with a swing of about 5.5%. So, we worked really hard in that first term, and I guess my challenge now in my second term is to continue that work rate. And I think as a member of Parliament, you've got a choice, right? You can sit in your office and wonder what happens outside the walls of your office, and wait for community members to come to you, and that may never happen. But my operating style has always been, I'm here to serve other people, and that means making myself vulnerable and getting out there and amongst it. Which is why I regularly meet with local clubs and community leaders and people just generally to get a sense of what's going on outside the four walls of this office. Because that's one of your principal jobs as a member of Parliament, is to find those things out and to help people. Right? It's all about trying to make the community a better place, trying to improve the lives of people within a community. And I really enjoy that. It's why I got into it in the first place. It's what sustained me in the role.
And I think a lot of people as well have that sort of reason to why they go into politics, or really to serve their communities, from all across, hoping across all political parties and, across all political lines. That should be the main sort of reason.
Look, not everyone in other political parties is a bad person. In fact, the vast majority of people in other political parties are good people. And I've got relationships with a number of those people. I think that's true. I think a lot of people get into politics because they do want to make a difference. They actually want to make an impact and make communities better places, positively impact the lives of people within those communities. I think that's why they get into politics in the first place. It's just how that's expressed, right, and how that's manifest. And so that's where I guess the principal difference is between major parties, for example. into as much detail as you like, but for example, there's a housing crisis on in Victoria at the minute, and so what the state Labor government has been doing has been to effectively increase a bunch of property-related taxes. Now, if I had the opportunity to be state treasurer today, what I'd be doing is, instead of using land taxes and property-related taxes as a punishment to try and curb behaviour in one particular direction in order to solve a crisis, what I'd be doing would be using the tax regime to try and incentivise good behaviour and better behaviour, to incentivise investment and lead to the same policy outcome. So, both Liberal and Labor acknowledge that there's a housing crisis at the minute. It's just the way that we try and go about solving that crisis, because of our different philosophies, is different. Does that mean that people executing on those ideas in the first place are innately bad people, or don't care about their communities? No, that's not true. But they just go about it in different ways, and I'd like to think that politics is a contest of ideas, and I'd like to think that the way that we're on about doing things is a better way, and a more engaging way, and a fairer way for more people.
And that's interesting as well, because I know some of your colleagues, like up in Mulholland, have actually talked a little bit about your latest housing policies and around the tax and around increased taxes.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive in a way, because if you're increasing land tax for property investment, a lot of those property investments, it's a lot of small families who own those sort of houses, and they're allowing people to rent them. And if you're disincentivizing them to invest and actually own a second or third property, you're going to be hurting the rental market, and you're going to be destroying and reducing the amount of rentals available in the market at all.
Well, you don't tax something more and it becomes cheaper.
Exactly.
If you tax something more, it's going to get more expensive, and someone's going to pay for it. And if you tax housing more, and we've got the highest property taxes in the nation in Victoria, then of course, the cost of housing is going to go up. Now, if you can't afford to buy a place, you're probably going to want to at least try to rent a place. And if you can't afford to buy a place and you're choosing to rent a place, it's probably because you can't buy a place more often than not. Now, I know that some people choose to rent a place, and that's all cool, no worries at all. But some of those people who can't afford to buy a place and therefore rent a place, they're not well-off people, mate. They're not well-to-do people. In fact, they're often subjected to vulnerabilities. And so this is the great injustice of it, right? So if you're increasing property taxes to a point where we've got the highest property taxes in the country, and who's actually paying for that? Often it's Victoria's most vulnerable. Often it's those people who do have a vulnerability, who are really struggling to make ends meet, and they're being saddled, they're being burdened with additional costs, additional rental costs. It's just, it's why I get into politics, is try and help people, and I think taxing people more isn't a way to help people. So
there's different ways to help people. It's not always just try and tax the rich people to help the poor. That's not always the best solution to any problem.
No, indeed.
I think we'll move on to our first questions then for you, Brad. So my first question to you is, how was your high school and university life? I know you did touch on it a little bit, do you have any memorable moments you'd like to share for the podcast?
Sure. So high school for me was at St Bede's College, Mentone. I left. I actually had to do year 12 over 2 years. So I had I got pretty sick in my year 12 year, my first year 12 year, and I ended up having to have some surgery in that year, some bowel surgery. And so I finished with a couple of subjects that year. I was also college vice captain of my school, and I was pretty involved in the life of the school community. But anyway, I had to come back into year 12 really over 2 years, so I came back the following year. Some of the highlights for me for school, certainly the opportunity to serve as the vice captain of the college was a great privilege, and I'm grateful for that opportunity and that leadership opportunity to serve that community. Having done year 12 over a couple of years, another highlight for me in my second year 12 year, because I was only doing a few subjects, I'd finished a few subjects the year before, I was able to have a crack at the school musical that year, which was Les Mis. And I grew up thanks to the sacrifices of my mum, learning piano, trombone, French horn, and singing as well. And a little known fact about me, I am a classically trained singer. And I do really enjoy singing, although I don't do it very often now. And so in my second year 12 year, I was able to, I was Jean Valjean, the lead role in the St Bede's College production of Les Mis, and I really loved it. So it was a great opportunity to spend time with people, to do something that I love doing, musical theatre and performance. Some would argue that it's a really good breeding ground for politicians. So there we are.
I think I've spoken to Emma Mulholland about this as well. He's also in the musical industry,
Yeah.
so it's quite crazy. And that's interesting as well that you had to do it over 2 years. Was that quite a turbulent time in your life? That year 12 year, especially talking about having to have bowel surgery in the middle of your year 12. That would have been very, very disruptive.
Yeah, look, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I look back at that time now, and I think that was a blessed opportunity for me, because it sort of flung upon my shoulders at a young age the need for resilience. Growing up, some people think, liberals, they must have been born with a silver spoon in their mouth. There must be these privileged class of people. Well, that's a lie. That's not true. I grew up in Boat Morrison, yes, generally an affluent part of Victoria. But my mum would look after kids. She'd do domestic cleaning. She'd take baskets of ironing to do for other families. My father retired when my twin brother and I was born. Didn't get back to work. He was an older father. He was 65 when my twin brother and I were born, and he lost all his money in the period building society, which happened in the 80s, and really lost all his life investment after working all his life. And so we grew up with not much privilege, if any privilege at all. But mum and dad worked bloody hard, right? And so did we. My twin brother and I, we delivered newspapers for the local newsagent, pamphlets. We used to clean the dunnies at the local bakery, stack shelves at the local supermarket, and work in the deli there, and on the register. We used to sell footy records at the MCG. Delivered medicines to the local chemist, all in Boat Morris. Not just to support myself, but to support my family as well. And that, I guess, taught me at a younger age that, if you work hard out of circumstances that are not of your choosing, you can make your way in the world. And I was able to buy my first car with cash that I'd earned. I was able to take my first overseas trip with cash that I'd earned. And I guess that part of my life had prepared me for later life when this other adversity came up. But I look back at it now as a blessing and one of life's blessings.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, life's not always a bed full of roses, there's thorns.
No.
So you've got to always keep pushing forward and be really resilient, because you'll face a lot of challenges in life. I'm at 18, and I'm going to probably experience a lot more challenges in my life into the future.
But that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's okay. That makes you a better person. That makes you a stronger person, a wiser person. And when we come up against adversity in our lives, we've got choice. We've got a choice to make. We can sort of sit in a heap and say, "No, this is all too much," and I can't do this. Or we can say, "Actually, what's the opportunity for me here?" So anyway, life's interesting.
Life is very interesting. And you've had an interesting life as well, Brad, pre-politics. So my next question to you is, I believe you studied theology and you almost became a priest. How did you go down that route, and what happened there? How come that sort of career change and you moved into the more corporate
You have done your research, haven't you, Francis? That's right. I did study to be a Catholic priest for 2.5 years, so I left after my second year 12 year. I was then the youth minister actually at St Bede's College for a year, and worked on staff and took specialised RE classes at the college, did retreat days and things like that, and worked with the student leaders a bit, which was terrific. I was studying arts teaching at Deakin Uni at the same time. But in my heart of hearts, and I was an old server at the local parish at Sandringham and Beaumaris since I was 7 years of age or thereabouts, and I'd always thought to myself, I might give this Catholic priesthood thing a crack at some point. I didn't want to be a 38-year-old bloke married with 2 kids, and to think to myself at this point, oh, maybe I should have given the seminary a crack. I should have, tested this vocation. And so I wanted to do that at a younger age, and I did. I spent 2.5 years in the Catholic seminary here in Melbourne. Again, a blessed opportunity in my life. I had the opportunity to be with, other Victorians, fellow humans, at some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. You don't learn how to nurse someone in the final moments of their life and pray with them and pray with their family in a university classroom. And those were some of the opportunities I had during pastoral work when I was studying for the Catholic priesthood. And they were genuinely blessed moments, and I'm grateful for it. I determined after 2.5 years that it wasn't for me. That was probably a harder decision to leave than it was to sign up to it in the first place. I started working shortly after that. I sort of gathered all the units that I'd had at Deakin in my arts teaching degree, all the philosophy units that I had from Catholic Theological College. I went back to Deakin University. I said, what's the fastest way to graduation with all of this? And I ended up graduating with an arts degree, a philosophy major.
It's quite interesting because I actually come from a very Catholic background.
Oh, good man.
I also altar serve at my local parish.
Good on you.
So, I can
Keep going.
I can kind of relate to that sort of situation. I've been doing it since I was about 12 years old, I think.
Oh, there you go.
When I was...
We can trade altar service stories offline, mate.
Exactly. There's been a lot of different sort of circumstances and, different priests, different sort of, they like things done a certain way, other priests like it done a certain way.
Indeed.
It's quite interesting. And, that is very interesting as well. I probably think you're probably the only Catholic priest, the Catholic, I think you're probably the only, MP who probably studied to become a Catholic priest in Parliament currently, I would assume.
In the current Parliament, yeah, that's probably the case.
I think I've talked to Andrew Wallace in Queensland. He actually also studied to be a Catholic priest.
He did, and former Prime Minister Abbott did as well.
Yes.
So yeah, there are a few of us around.
There's a few. So that's quite good.
But the point is, people say, oh, there's this, they couldn't think of anything more different between the church and what the church is on about and politics and Parliament and the state. And I actually disagree with that. What drew me to study for the Catholic priesthood in the first place was my ability to help people and to bring Catholic sacraments to people and to be with them in their moments of vulnerability and to help them. But that's exactly what drew me to be a Member of Parliament. The ability to help other people and to do good for other people and to be there for other people when they need someone there for them. And so I actually think there's great synergy between those two things.
And it's quite sad that those sort of bad parts of the church overwhelm the good parts of the church, the way that it's really, really sad. And that's probably the same thing as politics as well. The bad parts of politics really overwhelm, the good that politics can do towards society and people in general.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure that there's a moral equivalence between some of the sins I hope and pray of the past within the Catholic Church and some of the misdemeanours of politicians past, but I take the point. Look, the vast majority of priests that I know are darn good people, and they're there to help and serve their community. The vast majority of politicians that I know, and this isn't a partisan comment again, this is across the board, are good people wanting to do good things. So, there have been historically, bad apples in each of those bunches, and that's a tragedy.
It really is. I think we'll move on now to our third
Sure.
question for you, Brad. So I believe you also work for Raytheon Australia after you graduated from university. Are you able to talk a little bit about your career there and some of your experiences there?
Sure. So Raytheon Australia is a global defence company, employed when I was working there about 1,300 Australians, maybe a little bit more, 1,350 or so. About half of those were engineers and technicians. And so worked in the defence space here in Australia and right across Australia. And we do everything from weapons systems integration into submarines, into warships. It'd work on fast jet training up in Queensland. It'd work with radars and other technologies in Western Australia. It helped with the maintenance and upgrade of submarines when it came to their life cycle maintenance periods. It did, frankly, just a whole bunch of cool stuff in the defence space right around the country. I worked there as part of their communications team. I was a senior communications manager there. We had teams in South Australia and Canberra, and I think the best part of that for me was, again, the ability to try and help people, but to work in, frankly, this is a really cool space. What we were doing, again, wasn't necessarily for the benefit of the company, but for the benefit of the country. So, the solutions that we were providing, the services that we were providing to Australia's Defence Force helped secure our nation. And from that perspective, it was a really good time. Prior to that, I'd worked as a senior press secretary to two Australian defence ministers, and so I had a bit of an entree into the defence world. And I guess my guiding light and my interest in defence matters really came from my father, who, as I mentioned earlier, served our country in World War II in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. So, it was a fascinating time, and defence continues to be an area of fascination for me.
And how long did you actually work at Raytheon?
A couple of years, all up. Yeah, and it was great.
Good experience, Probably can't go into the details of what you actually did there. A bit confidential.
I'd be contravening my top secret security
Exactly.
clearance, so I won't.
Yes, but I think a lot of people out there, who may be interested in, defence, going down that path. What would you say to them, and what sort of advice you give to them? Especially if they want to join the armed forces,
Sure.
Air Force, Navy.
I think I'd say to those people who were considering joining our Australian Defence Force, give it a go, give it a crack, but do so with the right intentions. Are you doing it for the toys? Are you doing it for what you think the really cool experiences? Because they'll come, they'll go, they'll be few and far between. Your purpose needs to be serving our country and defending our country. I think that needs to be sort of your top line purpose. And all of those other things come with it, but that's not your principal purpose. Give it a go. Just pick up the line, call the defence recruiters, and have a chat to them. It will set young people, I think, in very good stead to contribute, whether it be in an ongoing way in defence or beyond.
Exactly, and we're having such a difficult issue right now, with recruiting people towards the Defence Force. So anyone out there who's really interested, in defence and that.
Victoria Police as well.
Exactly.
Serve your community, join the police.
And there's a lot of great Victorian policemen as well who've ended up going into Parliament.
Indeed.
I think Brad Baden,
Indeed.
Trung Lu.
Trung and Brad.
There's quite a number. So you never know where life will take you.
Indeed, Bill Tilley as well.
Bill Tilley, yes. So a couple of Liberals there. So
Indeed.
could end up becoming the next a Liberal minister in the government. Who knows?
Indeed.
But I think we'll move on now to our fourth question for you, Brad.
Sure, Francis.
So I believe you also work as an advisor for many state and federal MPs, including Kevin Andrews and Helen Croker, just to name a few. How was that experience overall, and how did that prepare you for your own political career?
Sure. Look, there are a couple of views about this, right? So, people outside of politics say that they want their politicians to have real life experience and real world experience, and I get that. I've had that, whether it be working, in Catholic education, whether it be working in the defence industry, whether it be being part of this community for my entire life. But yes, I've also worked for members of Parliament in junior and in senior roles. I've worked for cabinet ministers in governments, and I think that has set me up quite well to make a more meaningful contribution in my current role. Why? Because I understand how the systems of government work, and I've had that insight from the inside. And so whether it be community groups, industry associations, if they come to me now and they say, this is the outcome we want to achieve, is it eminently sensible for these reasons, how do we do it, how do we go about it, I'm able to help them in a more meaningful and effective way because I know how the systems of government work because I've been there. It was a privileged opportunity for me to serve our country as a senior advisor to a number of ministers in government ministers. And I'd always say to younger staff as well, and this never left me really, and it was a wonderful, fulfilling feeling actually. Whenever I'd be in Canberra and I'd pass the facade of the federal parliament, I just recall to myself just how privileged that opportunity was. And I'd say to other staffers, perhaps younger staffers, if that feeling of wonder and awe, if you like, that feeling of worth ever left them when they were staffing, do something else. Do something else. It's a privilege to help ministers serve the country as part of the government, and I'm grateful for that opportunity as well.
And not many people get that opportunity at all.
Indeed.
And as you said, I think it's a lot better to be in that political system for quite a bit, and get it transition to politics. Because at the end of the day, as you were saying, if you're into politics and you come from a complete private sector background, you're not going to know about the levels of government. You're not going to. It's a bit of a learning curve, to get straight into politics.
Indeed.
After spending 20, 30 years in the private sector, there's a lot of different challenges that you don't face there. So I think it's really important, as you said, to have that sort of public life experience, especially as an advisor, working in a political office, or really any sort of public works. And
It gives you an insight.
Yeah, and a lot of Labor MPs have had that public life, as public servants, being advisors, and that's probably one of the issues, I guess, with the Liberals. A lot of them do come from the private sector, and then when they come into Parliament, it's a bit of a learning curve to get started and actually get their foot in the door and start working hard for their communities.
Be impactful.
It's a really interesting thing. I think now we'll move on to our next question then for you,
Sure,
Brad.
no worries.
So, who would you say is your political role model or idol?
Good question. Look, for me, service is the highest form and best form of leading and leadership. Leadership is about doing good things for other people and not expecting something in return. So for me, I guess my more recent political role models would be people like Mr. Howard. I think, we sometimes look back at Mr. Howard and we think, gee, wouldn't it be great to have those times again? Stable times, pretty straightforward times. Howard did left an indelible mark on the soul of the nation through his contribution over more than a decade as Prime Minister of this country, and he did so in a measured and a balanced way. He wasn't afraid to take on board the challenges of the day, gun control most famously, but he also didn't shy away or shirk away, together with the help of his then Treasurer Peter Costello, from some major reforms which still are the hallmark of our systems today. GST is one of those examples. I guess another role model for me, and it's probably leaning in on my Catholic faith here, but people like Mother Teresa and people like St. John Paul II are great role models. John Paul II, when he was Pope, contributed to the fall of the Iron Curtain and the ending of communism in Europe, together with other great world leaders at the time. That's no small feat. And people like Mother Teresa, never walked past a need without doing something about it. And again, service leadership, servant leadership is the highest form of leadership, and that's why examples like that for me are, I hold in high regard, as even to the point of saying, a role model.
And that's interesting because actually my patron saint was St. John Paul II.
There you go.
And he's a very, very, very extremely important figure in society who I think a lot of people kind of do forget, was very instrumental, in bringing down the Iron Curtain and ending communism in Poland and then all across Europe. So he is an extremely good role model, and as you said, John Howard and Mother Teresa. as well. So that's quite interesting as well. I think you're the first person to actually say a non-political role model on the podcast as a political idol. So
Oh, there you go. It's another reason to listen to this podcast, mate.
exactly. Is there any other political role models, or even maybe overseas politicians that you kind of look to and are inspired by?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're role models. I mean, there are people that I admire for the way they've gone about things. I did admire and someone's referenced some of the speeches of JFK. I think his ability to, his oration ability is pretty impressive. I admire the grit and determination of Margaret Thatcher. There are a number of others, but that I admire. But in terms of the role model status, I'd probably outline that.
Exactly. There's a bit of a difference there between admiration and actually having someone to follow and emulise in a sense. So yeah. We'll move on to the next question then, Brad. So, what made you run in the 2018 state election for the Liberal Party, and actually, what made you join the Liberal Party?
Look, growing up, as I mentioned earlier, for me, I lived Liberal values. I got up every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning as a school kid to go and deliver newspapers, 6, sometimes 7 mornings a week. I didn't wait for someone else to define what my destiny was. I created it for myself. That is a Liberal value. Just having a go and finding your own way, and creating your own fortunes and creating your own future. These are all deeply, deeply Liberal values. And, sometimes people say to me when they hear my story, oh, you should be a member of the Labor Party. Your parents were recipients of welfare and you weren't that well-to-do when you were growing up. And I say, no, that's not true. Sure, there should be welfare, and there is, and it should be there for a limited amount of time to try and get people up and out of the circumstances they find themselves in. But we should always aspire to be better than our current selves and greater than our current selves. And so for me, the Liberal Party philosophy was something that neatly fitted with my own life experience, I guess. So what was the second part of the question?
What made you run in the 2018 state election?
Yes, indeed. Well, look, Murray Thompson was a member here for 26 years, a great man, a friend and mentor to me, and he decided to hang up the boots and say, he would be standing in the next state election. I was working in the defence industry at the time, quite enjoying that role, and Murray announced that he would be contesting the next state election in 2018. I thought, actually, I'll give this a crack. I'll put my hand up. It was a good time to do it. There were 5 other people in the pre-selection, and frankly, if I wasn't successful, then that's cool, because I would have gone back to the defence industry, and I would have returned to anonymity. I would have returned to more time with my family. But I was successful in that pre-selection, and was president, I think, 21 months before the 2018 state elections, a long time before that state election.
So that'd be about late 2016, probably.
I think it was around,
or early 2017. Sorry.
Yeah,
around that time.
Yeah, I think it was about March 2017 or thereabouts, February 2017 thereabouts. So it was a long time. It was a long time. And look, I gave it a go because I was born in the area, lived in the area all my life. I admired Murray Thompson, the former member. I thought that he provided a magnificent foundation from which to build. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose here. I'll give it a crack. And I did.
And that's quite interesting as well, going back to your first point around the aspirational class. I think sometimes it is kind of lost within the Liberal philosophy. A lot of people just assume Liberals in general are just rich people in the eastern suburbs. But in general, the party was founded on aspiration of the middle class, and that's something we've got to really try and aspire and try to appeal to those sort of people all across Victoria and all across Australia.
Indeed.
And you know, especially my area, you know, Point Cooking, there's a lot of aspirational sort of people there. So you know,
Well, I think there are a bunch of Victorians actually, Francis, that just want government to get out of their way. You know, they just want to live their best lives free of interference. They don't want government to interfere in their life. They just want to, you know, do the very best that they possibly can for themselves and for their families. And you know, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. You know, for someone who is aspiring to be in government, I don't want a big government. I want a little government. I think if governments start taking on the role of trying to care for other people, inevitably they do a pretty crappy job. So, you know, the best way we can help people, arguably, is to get out of their way, let them live their best lives, let them earn, you know, a wage and a highly paid job, allow them every opportunity to take care of themselves, take care of their family, and you know, create wealth and opportunity for other Victorians as well. So, yeah.
I mean, but not to the extent where there's no government at all. You know, you still want to be.
No, I'm not a complete anarchist. No, not at all.
Yeah, and you know, of course, you still got to have those sort of systems there just in place.
Sure.
If you know people are really are struggling, just to lift them up from that point of view, and then you know, at the end, you know, when they are back and stable on their feet, they can you know find a job and you know live without that government assistance, but it still has to be there in that sort of sense. So we'll move on to our final question for you.
Yeah,
Brad.
righto. Here we go.
You know, it's been a pretty speedy...
You put me through my paces.
Exactly. So finally, this is probably the hardest question I'll ask.
Yeah, right.
What would be some advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who have already studied university or studying high school?
The first thing I'd say to them is, don't underestimate yourself and don't undersell yourself. There are many people who are older people who say to young people, your time will come. You are the leaders of the future. And, you know, pat them on the head or whatever and send them on their way. I think that's rubbish. I think that's absolute crap. I've said so in speeches before, I'll say so again now. Young people are the leaders that our community needs today. So young people shouldn't undersell themselves, they shouldn't undersell their ability to contribute, their ability to have an opinion. My only word of caution or advice in that though is this. Don't just reply with information that you received yourself without it going through some sort of filter,
Exactly.
right? So that point about critical thinking is absolutely and utterly paramount. So if all you're doing is spitting back something that someone else has mentioned to you, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You're not learning, you're not growing, you're just repeating. So what you need to do is test everything, question everything. And it's at that point I think that you ensure that your own foundation is a solid foundation from which you can then make a contribution to your community, to your family, to your work or whatever it might be. So, you know, don't be afraid to give things a go. You are the leaders of the community now. Have your voice heard, but just don't spit out stuff and repeat it. Think about it, test the ideas, critically think, and contribute.
Exactly. Because you know, at the end of the day, as Brad said, you aren't the leaders in the future. You actually are the leaders now. So, and I think as well, especially about group, I think that's a really big issue. With young people, especially with their political views. They'll see what they might see on TikTok and Instagram. They'll just follow whatever their friends are doing. But I think at the end of the day, it's really, really important that you develop your own ideas and you develop your own thinking around certain issues because it affects you. And if you're just following the line and following what everyone else is doing, they might be wrong. And you never knew that because you never tried to actually study and actually learn about I guess the political world in a sense. So it's important to develop your own ideas and it coming from actually you, not coming from what you're seeing online or the people around you.
If we don't fail, we never learn.
Exactly.
If all we have in life is success, we never learn. The only way you learn is by making mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly. So, yeah. So those are all our questions for you,
Awesome,
Brad.
mate.
I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast and speaking to us. You know, it's been pretty long travel for me coming all the way from Point Cook to Sandringham.
Indeed, on public transport and everything.
But I do really appreciate you coming
You're right.
on the podcast and, you know, speaking to us, and hopefully maybe we can speak to you down the line, maybe as the treasurer of Victoria.
I'd be
in a couple
delighted
of
to
years.
do so, Francis. No worries at all.
Thank you again, Brad.
No worries, mate. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.